Hello, my dear adventurers. Welcome back to our cozy haven, where the whispers of ancient tales come alive and the creatures of legend step from shadow into light. Tonight, I invite you to journey with me through a world where the line between myth and reality blurs like smoke in the wind, where beasts both beautiful and terrible roam the lands, seas, and skies of Westeros and beyond. Picture yourself standing on the windswept battlements of Winterfell as the first snow of winter begins to fall. In the distance, beyond the ancient forest of towering sentinels and whispering leaves, you hear it. A howl that cuts through the frigid air, primal and haunting. It is not the cry of any ordinary wolf. This is the voice of something far older, far more magnificent. This is the song of a direwolf, a creature thought extinct south of the wall for 200 years, now returned to walk alongside the children of House Stark. Or perhaps you find yourself on the sun-scorched ruins of Old Valyria, where the very air shimmers with heat and magic. Here, in a civilization lost to catastrophe and time, dragons once filled the skies by the hundreds. Their shadows darkened entire kingdoms as they soared overhead, and their fire forged the greatest empire the world had ever known. These were not mere animals, but living embodiments of power itself, creatures of flame and fury, whose very existence was intertwined with the threads of ancient sorcery. The world of Game of Thrones is populated by creatures that would make even the bravest knight's blood run cold, and the most cynical maester question everything he thought he knew. Tonight, we will explore them all. In the beginning, there were no dragons in Westeros. The continent knew bears and wolves, lions and aurochs, but nothing that could match the sheer magnificent terror of a dragon. These legendary creatures came from the east, from the smoking mountains and volcanic peaks of the Valyrian Peninsula, where ancient shepherds first discovered them nesting in the 14 Flames thousands upon thousands of years ago. Dragons are not simple beasts. They are magic incarnate, living, breathing manifestations of power that defy the natural order. Their very existence seems to strengthen magic in the world around them, as if they serve as conduits for forces beyond mortal comprehension. When they died out, magic itself seemed to fade and wither. When they returned, through Daenerys Targaryen's impossible miracle in Khal Drogo's funeral pyre, the world felt it. Warlocks in distant Korth suddenly found their powers multiplied. Red priests spoke with renewed fervor about ancient prophecies. Even the masters of the Citadel, with all their skepticism and chains of learning, could not deny that something fundamental had shifted. The dragons of Valyria were the key to that civilization's dominance. Imagine a society built not on castles of stone, but on the backs of creatures that could rain fire from the heavens. The dragon lords of Old Valyria controlled hundreds of these magnificent beasts, using them to forge an empire that stretched across the known world. They conquered the old empire of Geese, burning its capital to ash and sowing its fields with salt, so nothing would ever grow there again. They defeated the Rhoynar people, who fought back with water magic and courage, but ultimately fell before dragonfire. 300 dragons attacked at once during that final assault, turning the rivers themselves to steam. But what exactly is a dragon? Let me paint you a picture in words, for these creatures defy simple description. A dragon's body is long and serpentine, covered in scales that gleam like polished armor. These scales are not uniform but vary in color and texture depending on the dragon's lineage. Drogon, Daenerys' fearsome black dragon, has scales as dark as a starless night, with eyes like burning coals. Rhaegal, named for her brother, is adorned in bronze and green scales that shimmer in sunlight. Viserion, before his terrible transformation, was cream and gold, beautiful in the way that sunrise over water is beautiful. The structure of their bodies follows a unique design, similar in some ways to that of a bat. They have 4 limbs in total, 2 powerful hind legs that end in talons sharp enough to pierce armor, and 2 massive wings that also serve as their forelimbs. When grounded, dragons walk with an awkward, lumbering gait, their wings folded along their sides. But in the air, they transform into grace itself, swooping and diving with precision that belies their enormous size. And what size they can achieve. The dragons of legend grew to proportions that seem impossible, yet are well documented. Balerion, the Black Dread, ridden by Aegon the Conqueror during his conquest of Westeros, grew so immense that his shadow could engulf entire towns. His skull, preserved in the depths of the Red Keep, is large enough that a person could ride a horse through his open jaws. His teeth are as long as swords. This was not the largest he could have become either. Balerion was only around 200 years old when he died, and dragons, if allowed to grow unhindered, might live for centuries more, growing larger all the while. The fire that dragons breathe is not like any flame kindled by man. It burns hotter than any forge, hot enough to melt stone into flowing rivers of glass, hot enough to reduce a man in full armor to nothing but ash and twisted metal in moments. This dragonfire is how Aegon the Conqueror forged the Iron Throne, melting together 1,000 swords of his defeated enemies into a throne that would become a symbol of power for 3 centuries. The color of dragonfire can vary. Balerion's flames were black as pitch, threaded with red. Others breathe flames of yellow and orange, or even blue. But dragons are more than just living weapons. They possess intelligence, perhaps even more than men in some ways. They can understand commands, though they choose whether or not to obey. They bond with their riders in ways that go far beyond simple training. A dragon will accept only one rider at a time, and that bond, once formed, runs deep. The dragon can sense its rider's emotions, their anger and fear and joy. In battle, dragon and rider move as one, anticipating each other's intentions. The Targaryens, the last of the Valyrian dragon lords, knew secrets that have since been lost. They understood that dragon eggs must be kept warm, but also that temperature alone is not enough. Magic plays a role in their hatching, blood magic perhaps, though the specifics remain shrouded in mystery. Daenerys walked into fire itself, emerging unburnt with 3 newly hatched dragons. But this was not something even other Targaryens could replicate. Many had tried, and many had died in those attempts. There are legends of different types of dragons beyond the fire-breathers of Valyria. Far to the north, sailors speak of ice dragons dwelling in the shivering sea and the white waste beyond. These creatures are said to be larger than their Valyrian cousins, made of living ice rather than flesh and blood, breathing frozen air instead of flame. Their existence has never been confirmed, but the stories persist. Some claim they breathe cold so intense it can freeze a man solid in seconds. Then there are the sea dragons, serpents of impossible length that inhabit the deepest oceans, competing with krakens for dominance of the depths, and fireworms, which we will discuss shortly, creatures related to dragons but lacking wings, burrowing through stone and earth with bodies that burn from within. The tragedy of dragons is that they did not die of natural causes. They were killed slowly, systematically, by the very family that had brought them to Westeros. The Dance of the Dragons, the brutal civil war that tore House Targaryen apart, saw dragons fighting dragons for the first time since the doom of Valyria. It was dragonfire against dragonfire, rider against rider. And when the war ended, most of the great dragons were dead. The survivors were smaller, weaker. The last dragon to hatch was a twisted, malformed creature that died within hours. For 150 years, dragons were extinct. Their bones decorated the tunnels beneath the Red Keep. Their skulls served as reminders of lost glory. Meisters wrote that they had never truly been as large or as powerful as the legends claimed, that stories had exaggerated their size and ferocity. But they were wrong. When Daenerys's dragons took flight for the first time, it sent ripples through the world. She started with 3 small creatures, each no larger than a cat. But dragons grow, and they grew for her. Drogon, her largest and most fearsome, eventually became large enough to carry her aloft, large enough to burn fleets and shatter armies. At the siege of Meereen, he incinerated ships in the harbour. During the sack of King's Landing in the show's final season, he reduced thousands to ash. Dragons in this world serve as symbols, but they are also more than that. They are proof that magic is real, that the world is stranger and more wonderful and more terrifying than the pragmatic minds of men would like to believe. They are power incarnate, yes, but also mystery. What do they think about as they soar through clouds? Do they dream when they sleep curled in their lairs? Do they remember the 14 flames, their ancestral home, now lost beneath the smoking sea? These questions may never be answered. But one thing is certain. Dragons are the apex predators of this world. Creatures of fire and blood that sit at the very peak of the bestiary we explore tonight. Nothing else matches their destructive capability, their longevity, their sheer presence. They are what nightmares and dreams are both made of, terrible and beautiful in equal measure. And yet, for all their power, dragons can be killed. A well-aimed scorpion bolt through the eye, a skilled warrior with a Valyrian steel blade, another dragon in combat. These things can end even the mightiest dragon's life. They are not invincible. They are creatures of flesh and scale for all their magic. But while they live, they command respect and inspire terror in ways few other creatures can match. The world waits to see if dragons will continue to survive, or if they will fade into legend once more. But for now, in this moment, they live. They fly, they breathe fire into the sky, and remind us all that there are forces in this world beyond human control or understanding. If dragons are fire given life, then the White Walkers are ice given malevolent purpose. They emerge from the frozen wastes of the far north, from the mysterious and uncharted lands of always winter, bringing with them cold so intense it can freeze flesh in moments, winter that lasts for generations, and death that does not end, but instead becomes servitude to their terrible will. The White Walkers were not always the nightmares that haunt the long night. They were created, crafted through dark magic by the children of the forest, in a desperate attempt to defend themselves against the first men who had invaded Westeros and begun cutting down the sacred weirwood trees. The children, small and few in number, could not stand against the tide of humanity through conventional warfare alone. So they turned to magic, to powers that should never have been awakened. In a clearing deep in the haunted forest, surrounded by weirwood trees with their bone-white bark and bleeding red leaves, the children performed a ritual. They took a captive man, bound him to a weirwood tree, and drove a shard of dragon glass into his heart. The transformation was horrific. His eyes turned from brown to the blue of winter ice. His skin paled to the colour of milk. The warmth left his body, replaced by supernatural cold. He became something no longer human, the first of the White Walkers, the Night King. But the children's creation did not remain under their control. The White Walkers broke free from whatever bonds had been placed upon them and turned their cold fury upon all living things. They began raising an army from the dead, reanimating corpses to serve as their foot soldiers. These creatures, called Whites, are perhaps even more terrifying than the White Walkers themselves in some ways, for they represent a perversion of death itself. The White Walkers appear as tall, gaunt, humanoid figures with flesh as pale as milk, and eyes that glow with coal blue fire. They move with eerie grace, their steps leaving no tracks in the snow despite the weight they must carry. They wear armor that seems to shift and change color as they move, appearing now silver, now blue, now as white as fresh snow. The material of this armor is unclear, perhaps crafted from ice itself through magic, perhaps something else entirely. Their weapons are equally mysterious and far more deadly. White Walkers carry blades, spears, and other implements of war crafted from a crystalline substance that resembles ice, but possesses supernatural sharpness and strength. These ice weapons can shatter normal steel on contact, simply touching metal and watching it fracture into useless shards. The sound these weapons make is like the cracking of ice on a frozen lake, musical in its own terrible way. When a White Walker moves, the temperature plummets. Frost spreads across surfaces they walk near. Breath becomes visible in the air even on days that should be warm. Plants wither and die at their touch. Water freezes solid. This is not merely the cold of winter, but something deeper, something wrong on a fundamental level, as if the very concept of warmth and life is being sucked from the world. But the White Walkers' most fearsome ability is their power over death itself. When a person dies in their presence, or even when someone dies hours earlier if a White Walker later passes by the corpse, the dead rise again as Whites. These reanimated corpses retain none of their former personality or will. They are extensions of the White Walker's consciousness, seeing through its eyes, moving according to its whims. A single White Walker can control dozens, perhaps hundreds of Whites simultaneously. Whites are horrifying in their own right. They feel no pain, no fear, no hesitation. A White will continue fighting even if dismembered, its severed parts crawling across the ground to attack anything living. They can only be permanently stopped by fire, which is perhaps why the wildlings beyond the wall always burn their dead, even in summer. Better a cremation pyre than the thought of a loved one rising as a mindless servant to the others, as the wildlings call the White Walkers. The appearance of Whites varies depending on how long they have been dead before reanimation. Fresh corpses look almost normal save for their glowing blue eyes and the unnatural way they move. But older corpses, bodies that have rotted in the ground for years before being called to serve, are skeletal horrors, held together by magic rather than sinew, with tattered remnants of burial shrouds hanging from exposed bones. The Whites are not stupid, despite being controlled. They can coordinate attacks, set ambushes, even use weapons if they had training in life. At the Battle of Hardhome, Whites swarmed over the walls of the village in organized waves, working together to overwhelm the living defenders. Some Whites even rode undead horses, galloping through the snow with weapons raised, a parody of cavalry charges from living wars. But there are other creatures in the White Walker's arsenal, creatures spoken of in legend, but not yet seen in the flesh. Old Nan, the ancient storyteller of Winterfell, told young Bran Stark of the long night when the White Walkers first came south. She spoke of them riding dead horses, yes, but also hunting with packs of pale spiders as large as hounds. Giant ice spiders, she called them, with legs like spears and mandibles that could tear through armor. These ice spiders have not appeared in the series yet, neither in the show nor in the books that continue beyond where the show ended. But the legends persist across multiple sources. Wildlings tell stories of the last hero, the legendary figure who fought against the others in the first long night, being hunted through the frozen wilderness by packs of these spiders. Samwell Tarly finds references to them in ancient texts at Castle Black, mentions of White Walkers riding giant ice spiders into battle. Are they real? That question remains unanswered. But in a world where dragons return from extinction and dead men walk at the command of ice demons, dismissing any legend becomes foolish. The ice spiders may yet crawl from the lands of always winter when the long night returns, and if they do, they will be unlike any spider the natural world produces. The White Walkers themselves seem to have some form of society or hierarchy. The Night King stands at their head, distinguishable by the crown of ice horns that grows from his skull like a terrible parody of royal authority. Other White Walkers, perhaps his lieutenants or generals, ride at his side. Whether they communicate with each other through speech or through some form of telepathic link remains unknown. Their language, if they have one, sounds like the cracking of ice, incomprehensible to human ears. The origins of the Night King's desires remain mysterious. Why does he march south with his army of the dead? What drives him? In the show, he seemed to want to erase all memory and history by killing Bran Stark, the three-eyed raven, who holds the memories of the world within himself. But this explanation leaves much unsaid. Is it simple malevolence? A twisted echo of the purpose for which he was created, to defend against humanity now taken to its horrific extreme? Or does he have goals beyond human comprehension? What is known is that White Walkers can be killed, though not easily. Dragon glass, also called obsidian, can pierce their supernatural flesh. When struck by a weapon of dragon glass, a White Walker does not bleed or fall normally. Instead, the wound spreads like frost across its body, freezing it solid from the inside out. The walker experiences obvious agony, its mouth opening in a silent scream, before it shatters into shards of ice that melt away to nothing within moments. Valyrian steel has the same effect, though it works even faster. When Jon Snow struck a White Walker with his Valyrian steel bastard sword Longclaw, the walker shattered almost instantly, destroyed in a single blow. This makes Valyrian steel weapons incredibly valuable, though they are also incredibly rare. Perhaps only a few hundred such blades exist in all of Westeros, each one a priceless heirloom passed down through noble houses for generations. Fire can drive White Walkers back, though whether it can truly kill them remains unclear. They avoid fire, seeming to fear it in a way they fear little else. This makes sense for creatures of ice and cold. Fire is anathema to everything they represent. Most terrible of all is the hierarchical nature of their control. When a White Walker dies, all the whites it has personally raised crumble to dust. They are puppets whose strings have been cut, but this also means that killing the Night King himself, the first and most powerful of the White Walkers, would theoretically destroy the entire army of the dead in one fell swoop. Every walker he created, every white under their command, all would fall simultaneously. This is precisely what happened during the Battle of Winterfell, when Arya Stark drove her Valyrian steel dagger into the Night King's chest. The moment he shattered, his lieutenants exploded into ice crystals, and 100,000 wights collapsed like marionettes with severed strings. An army that had seemed invincible was destroyed in a single moment. The White Walkers represent perhaps the most existential threat in this entire bestiary. Dragons can be bargained with through their riders. Direwolves can be befriended. Even manticores and shadow cats have predictable behaviors born from natural instinct. But the White Walkers bring something else entirely. The end of life itself. The transformation of all living things into obedient corpses in service to eternal winter. They are death-walking, dressed in armor of ice and wielding blades of frozen crystal. They are winter that never ends, cold that sinks into bones and souls alike. They are the enemy of all living things, caring nothing for the squabbles of kings or the games played for thrones of iron. And should they ever march south in earnest, with their full strength unleashed, it would take every living creature working together to stand any chance of survival. The Night's Watch swore an oath. I am the sword in the darkness. I am the watcher on the walls. I am the shield that guards the realms of men. For thousands of years, that oath was laughed at by Southerners who believed the White Walkers were nothing but scary stories told to frighten children. But the Night's Watch knew the truth. The true enemy was always in the north, waiting in the frozen darkness, patient as only the dead can be patient. In the opening of the very first episode of Game of Thrones, in the very first chapter of George R.R. Martin's first book, we encounter creatures that set the stage for everything to come. Direwolves. Lord Eddard Stark and his sons find a dead mother direwolf south of the wall, and with her 6 pups. 5 are taken by the 5 legitimate Stark children, and 1, the albino runt of the litter, goes to Jon Snow, the acknowledged bastard. This moment seems like simple providence, but it is far more. Direwolves are not merely large wolves. They are to normal wolves what dragons are to lizards, a fundamental leap into something greater, something touched by old magic. A direwolf can grow as large as a pony, with heads big enough that they reach a man's chest when standing on all fours. Their jaws can crush bones like dry kindling. Their eyes hold intelligence that seems to border on human understanding. In the books, we learn more detail about their appearance. Their legs are proportionally longer than normal wolves, built for long-distance running across tundra and through deep snow. Their heads are larger, more massive, with pronounced muzzles filled with teeth designed for bringing down prey far bigger than themselves. Their fur comes in various colors: grey, black, shaggy brown, even pure white, in the case of Jon Snow's wolf Ghost. The names given to the Stark direwolves are prophetic in ways that become clear only later. Grey Wind, Lady, Nymeria, Summer, Shaggy Dog, and Ghost. Each wolf reflects the fate and personality of their human companion. Grey Wind was fierce and quick, but died in betrayal alongside Robb Stark at the Red Wedding. Lady was gentle and innocent, killed on the orders of King Robert for a crime she did not commit, foreshadowing Sansa's suffering in King's Landing. Nymeria was sent away by Arya to save her life, and now leads a pack of hundreds in the Riverlands. Summer protected Bran until dying in his defense. Shaggy Dog's fate in the show was cruel, reflecting the harsh reality of Rickon's death. And Ghost, the albino outcast, remained loyal to Jon through everything, even death itself. But the connection between the Stark children and their wolves goes deeper than simple pet ownership. The Starks possess the blood of the first men, and with it, an ancient gift mostly forgotten in the modern age. The ability to walk, to slip into the minds of animals and control them. Bran Stark discovers this ability first, learning to see through Summer's eyes, to run with 4 legs through the forest, to hunt and fight as a wolf. But the books make clear that all the Stark children have some degree of this power, even if they don't fully understand or control it. When Robb Stark rode to war, Grey Wind would scout ahead, his enhanced senses detecting ambushes that would have killed Robb otherwise. Arya dreams of her wolf across the sea, Nymeria's dreams blending with her own. Jon learns to walk into Ghost out of necessity, particularly after his death and resurrection, when his wolf served as an anchor to keep his soul from disappearing into death's darkness. This bond between human and direwolf creates something unprecedented. Warriors with the fighting instincts of apex predators combined with human intelligence. A direwolf that fights with strategy and purpose rather than mere animal instinct becomes exponentially more dangerous. They can open doors with their teeth, understand complex commands, even work in coordination with human forces during battle. The extinction and return of direwolves south of the Wall mirrors the return of dragons to the world. For 200 years, no direwolf had been seen south of the Wall. They were thought to exist only in the far north, if they existed at all. Many southerners believed them to be extinct entirely, or perhaps mythological creatures that had never truly existed. But there they were, 6 pups found on the very day that Jon Snow came to Winterfell. Too perfect a coincidence to be mere chance. In the north, beyond the Wall, direwolves still roamed in the wild, though rare even there. The wildlings knew them and feared them. A pack of direwolves could bring down a mammoth if they worked together. They would fight against the Whites and White Walkers, though even direwolves' strength and ferocity meant little against an enemy that felt no pain and refused to die unless burned. Direwolves in the wild are social animals, living in packs, much like their smaller cousins. But these packs are different. A direwolf pack has an intelligence to its organization, with complex hierarchies and sophisticated hunting strategies. They can take down prey much larger than themselves through coordination and tactical thinking that seems to border on sapience. The book provides more detail about direwolf behaviors. They are fiercely territorial, marking their hunting grounds with scent and patrolling the boundaries regularly. They mate for life, a single bonded pair leading the pack, with their offspring and adopted members forming the rest of the group. When a packmate dies, the others mourn, howling their grief into the night sky. But bonded direwolves, those who have formed a connection with a human through warging, behave differently. They retain their fierce protection of their human, but they also seem to absorb some aspect of that person's personality. Lady was gentle because Sansa was gentle. Grey Wind was fierce and proud like Robb. Nymeria became a survivor, adapting and leading, just as Arya learned to survive and eventually lead. Ghost is quiet, almost spectral in his movements, matching Jon's outsider status and his role as a silent protector. The fighting capability of a direwolf should not be underestimated. Grey Wind is said to have killed dozens of men during Robb Stark's campaign in the Riverlands, tearing through enemy lines like a hurricane of fur and fangs. When Robb sent him to chase down fleeing enemies, Grey Wind could run down mounted knights, leaping onto horses and dragging riders from their saddles. Summer defended Bran against everything from wildling assassins to whites, fighting with savage determination even when wounded. In the cave of the three-eyed raven, Summer held back whites through sheer ferocity, buying precious seconds for Bran to be pulled to safety. Ghost, despite being the runt, grew into a massive direwolf, white as snow with eyes like pools of blood. He was nearly silent when he moved, appearing beside Jon without warning, earning his name through his ability to manifest like a phantom. Ghost killed men who would have murdered Jon, fought beside him at the wall, and remained loyal even when Jon died and was brought back to life. The tragedy is that most of the direwolves die. They die protecting their human companions, or they die because of the cruelty of others, or they die in the chaos of war. By the end of the series, only Ghost and Nymeria clearly survive, and Nymeria is wild, no longer bonded to Arya in the same way she once was. There's a symbolism to the direwolves that runs through the entire narrative. House Stark's sigil is a grey direwolf on a white field. Their words are, "Winter is coming." The direwolves represent the old ways, the connection to the first men, and the magic that still lingers in the world despite mankind's best efforts to forget it. When the direwolves die, part of that old magic dies with them. Direwolves also serve as a reminder that magic in this world is not always flashy or obvious. It doesn't always manifest as fire-breathing dragons or corpses rising from the dead. Sometimes magic is the bond between a boy and his wolf, the ability to see through another creature's eyes, the instinct that warns of danger before it strikes. Would direwolves exist without human intervention? Almost certainly. They are natural creatures, albeit rare and magnificent ones. But the bonded direwolves, those who walk alongside the Stark children, are something more. They are the physical manifestation of the Stark's connection to the North, to winter, to the old powers that predate the Andals and their seven-pointed star. When Jon Snow stands before his enemies with Ghost at his side, he is not just a man with a pet. He is a symbol of House Stark, of the North, of everything the Southern Lords have forgotten or dismissed as superstition. He is proof that the old ways still have power, that the blood of the first men still runs true in the veins of those who call Winterfell home. Direwolves are not as overtly powerful as dragons. They cannot breathe fire or fly. They will not live for centuries. But in their own way, they are just as important to the story, just as meaningful. They are the guardians of the North, the silent shadows that walk beside the Starks, the fangs that defend the innocent and punish the guilty. They are memory made flesh, a reminder that some things are older and deeper than the games people play for power. And when a direwolf howls in the night, it is a sound that reaches back through thousands of years, echoing the voice of the first men, calling to something primal in the blood of those who hear it. It is a sound that says, "Winter is here. The North remembers, and we are not alone." Beyond the legendary creatures that dominate tales and prophecies, Westeros and the lands beyond are home to numerous predators that, while not magical, are nonetheless fearsome and deadly in their own right. These are the hunters that stalk through forests and mountains, the killers that serve as reminders that nature itself can be just as dangerous as any White Walker or dragon. Let us begin with the Shadow Cats. Creatures mentioned frequently throughout the series, but rarely seen, adding to their mystique. Shadow cats are large feline predators, comparable in many ways to the mountain lions and cougars of our own world, but with distinct differences that mark them as uniquely suited to the harsh environments of Westeros. A shadow cat stands perhaps 3 feet at the shoulder and can measure 7 feet from nose to tail. Their most distinctive feature is their coloration. Thick black fur marked with white stripes that run along their bodies, creating patterns that break up their outline in the dappled light of forest and mountain. This coloration is not merely decorative. Shadow cats are ambush predators, and their striped coats allow them to blend seamlessly into the shadows of rocky outcroppings and dense underbrush. These creatures are found across Westeros, from the mountains of Dawn in the south to the icy reaches beyond the wall in the north. They seem to have adapted to vastly different climates, perhaps representing different subspecies that have evolved separately. The shadow cats of the Mountains of the Moon, where Tyrion Lannister encountered them, live in high altitudes, making their dens in caves and hunting the goats and mountain sheep that graze on the steep slopes. In the north, they hunt elk and deer, while in Dawn, they prey on whatever crosses their path in the rocky desolation of the Red Mountains. Shadow cats are solitary hunters, as most large felines are. They have territories that can span dozens of miles, and they mark these territories with scent markings and claw marks scraped into trees and boulders. Encountering another shadow cat within one's territory typically results in a fierce battle, though during mating season, males and the females will briefly coexist. What makes shadow cats particularly dangerous is their ability to smell blood from miles away. Stories suggest they can detect the scent of blood in the air from up to 6 miles distant, an adaptation that allows them to find wounded prey that might otherwise escape. This means that anyone injured in shadow cat territory becomes a target, the scent of their blood drawing the predators like sharks to chum in water. The fur of a shadow cat is prized throughout Westeros for its warmth and distinctive appearance. Garments made from shadow cat pelts, called shadow skin, are both practical and symbolic. They mark the wearer as someone dangerous, someone who either killed a shadow cat themselves or had the wealth to purchase such a rare and expensive hide. Tyrion Lannister acquires a shadow skin cloak during his time in the Mountains of the Moon, wearing it both for warmth and as a psychological tool, the pelts of predators lending him an air of danger he needed while navigating the treacherous politics of the Eyrie. Shadow cats are not the only fearsome felines to roam Westeros. In the western hills of the continent, lions once roamed freely, actual lions not unlike those of Africa and Asia. These magnificent beasts made their dens in the Casterly Rock itself, the great fortress that gives House Lannister its seat of power. The lions are important to understanding the Lannister identity. Their sigil is a golden lion on a field of crimson, and the history of the Lannisters is intertwined with these great cats. According to legend, Lann the Clever, the founder of House Lannister, drove the lions from their dens in Casterly Rock through trickery rather than force, claiming the castle for himself. Whether this story is true remains debatable, but what is certain is that lions were once numerous in the western hills. They were apex predators, massive and powerful, with males sporting thick manes and females hunting in coordinated prides. Sadly, the great lions of the West are now extinct or nearly so. Systematic hunting over centuries has reduced their numbers to perhaps a handful surviving in the most remote hills, if any survive at all. One of the Clegane brothers' ancestors earned his knighthood by saving Lord Titus Lannister from a lioness, losing a leg and 3 dogs in the battle. That may have been one of the last encounters with a wild lion in the region. The extinction of the lion serves as a subtle commentary on the relationship between mankind and the natural world in Westeros. As civilization expands, the great beasts retreat and eventually disappear. This theme recurs throughout the Bestiary. Mammoths, giants, direwolves, dragons, all pushed to the edge of extinction by the steady advance of human settlement. In the far north, beyond the wall and in the highest mountains, another predator stalks the frozen wastes, the snow bear. These creatures are similar to the polar bears of our world, but larger, more aggressive, and even more perfectly adapted to their environment. A snow bear can stand 12 feet tall when reared on its hind legs, with paws as large as serving platters and claws that can rip through armor as easily as cloth. Snow bears are covered in thick white fur that provides excellent camouflage against snow and ice. This fur is layered, with a dense underfur for insulation and longer guard hairs that shed water and trap heat. A snow bear can swim through icy water that would kill a human from cold shock in minutes, emerging completely unaffected. These bears are omnivores, eating everything from seals and fish to berries and roots when they can find them. But they are also opportunistic predators. A snow bear will gladly attack and eat any human who crosses its path, viewing people as just another potential meal. They are incredibly dangerous, combining enormous strength with surprising speed. A charging snow bear can cover ground at speeds approaching 30 miles per hour despite their bulk. The wildlings beyond the wall tell stories of snow bears attacking their camps, tearing through walls made of packed snow and hide, dragging screaming victims into the darkness. A few wildling warriors claim to have killed snow bears in single combat, and those warriors are treated with immense respect, for such a feat requires not just skill and strength, but tremendous courage. In the books, the character Varamir Sixskins, a powerful wildling skin changer, controls a snow bear through his warging abilities. The description of seeing through the bear's eyes reveals a creature of pure instinct and power, feeling neither cold nor fear, only hunger and the will to survive. The snow bear's mind is described as difficult to control, wild and savage, resisting domination even from an experienced warg. But perhaps the most magnificent of the northern megafauna are the mammoths, colossal herbivores that roam the frozen lands beyond the wall in herds. Mammoths in this world are much like the woolly mammoths of our Ice Age, massive elephantine creatures standing 14 feet at the shoulder, covered in shaggy brown hair that hangs in curtains around their bodies, with curved tusks that can measure 15 feet from base to tip. These tusks are not just for show. Male mammoths use them in dominance contests, crashing together with tremendous force that can be heard for miles across the tundra. The tusks are also used to dig through snow and ice to reach the vegetation beneath, and as weapons against predators. A mammoth that feels threatened will charge, and being struck by several tons of angry mammoth usually results in instant death. The giants beyond the wall have learned to work with mammoths, riding them into battle and using them as beasts of burden. Seeing a giant astride a mammoth must be a sight to inspire awe and terror in equal measure. A 14-foot-tall giant riding a creature even larger than himself, the ground shaking with each step of the mammoth's pillar-like legs. Mammoths are surprisingly intelligent for herbivores. They have complex social structures within their herds, with older females serving as matriarchs who lead the group to food and water sources they remember from decades past. They mourn their dead, standing vigil over fallen herd members, touching the bodies gently with their trunks. They will defend injured or young herd members, forming defensive circles with the vulnerable individuals protected in the center. But like so many of the great beasts, mammoths are dying out. Leaf, one of the children of the forest, tells Bran that the mammoths are down to a few hundred at most. Human expansion, climate changes, hunting by both wildlings and White Walkers for their meat and hides, all have taken their toll. Within another generation or two, mammoths may vanish entirely, another species lost to the march of time. There are other predators worth noting. Aurochs, massive wild cattle that once roamed throughout Westeros, but now survive only in limited regions, their domesticated descendants serving as oxen and beef cattle. Wild boars in the Kingswood, dangerous and aggressive when cornered. Elk and deer that, while prey species, can become dangerous when a stag decides to defend his herd or his territory with his antlers. These creatures, while lacking the magic of dragons or the supernatural horror of White Walkers, are nonetheless important parts of the world's ecosystem. They represent the natural dangers that existed long before magic returned to the world, the threats that simple people face when they venture into the wilderness. A farmer might never see a dragon or a direwolf, but a shadow cat or a wild boar could very well be the death of him. They also serve as a reminder that Westeros, for all its castles and cities, remains a wild place. The vast forests that cover much of the continent are not parkland maintained for pleasure hunts. They are genuine wilderness, home to predators that have held their territories for thousands of years. The mountains are not scenic backdrops but harsh environments where humans venture at their peril. And as civilization continues to expand, as more forests are cleared for farmland and more mountains are mined for iron and gold, these creatures vanish. The lions are gone. The mammoths are dying. The shadow cats retreat further into the wilderness. In some ways, this is sadder than the extinction of dragons, for these are natural creatures whose only crime is existing in a world that increasingly has no room for them. There are creatures spoken of throughout Westeros and beyond, whose existence remains uncertain, whose appearances in historical records are rare or contradictory, whose very nature seems to defy the possible. These are the creatures of legend, beings that may be real, may be myth, or may exist in some strange space between the two. Let us explore these mysteries, these whispers of the impossible. We begin beneath the waves, in the dark depths where sunlight never reaches, with perhaps the most famous of legendary sea creatures, krakens. These massive cephalopods, giant squids of impossible size, are claimed by some to be mere sailors' tales, exaggerations of encounters with large but mundane squid. Others insist they are real, citing eyewitness accounts from reliable sources. A kraken is described as a monstrous creature with a body as large as a whaling ship and tentacles that can reach up from the depths to wrap around a vessel, dragging it down to the ocean floor. Sailors speak of seeing krakens surface briefly, their massive eyes staring up at the sky before they sink back into the abyss. The creatures are said to be attracted to the smell of blood in the water, rising up to investigate whaling operations or naval battles. House Greyjoy of the Iron Islands uses a golden kraken as their sigil, and they claim connection to these creatures as the Targaryens claim connection to dragons. The Greyjoys sit upon the sea stone chair, carved to resemble a kraken, in the castle of Pike. According to their legends, House Celtiga of Claw Isle possesses a horn that can summon krakens from the depths, though whether this horn truly exists or truly works remains unverified. In the books, there are mentions of krakens attacking ships. Varys speaks of an Ibonese whaler that was pulled under by a kraken near the fingers. Bodies washed ashore showing massive sucker marks on their flesh. But these accounts are always second-hand or third-hand, stories passed along rather than direct observation. No living person in the main narrative has seen a kraken and survived to give a detailed account. The existence of krakens remains ambiguous, suspended in that space between real and legendary. They may be real, but extraordinarily rare, dwelling in the deepest ocean trenches and only rarely coming near the surface. They may be exaggerations of encounters with large but natural squid, or they may be something else entirely, creatures that exist in a magical sense, called forth by ancient horns or appearing only during certain astronomical conditions. Even more mysterious are the sea dragons, serpentine creatures of enormous length that supposedly inhabit the deepest oceans. Sea dragons are described as wingless, legless serpents, easily distinguished from the winged fire-breathing dragons of Valyria. They can grow to incredible sizes, with some tales speaking of sea dragons hundreds of feet long, their bodies undulating through the water like massive eels. Unlike krakens, which are at least theoretically possible as natural creatures, sea dragons seem to require magic to exist. They are said to breathe not fire, but superheated steam, boiling the water around them. Some accounts describe them as having multiple heads, though this might be confusion or exaggeration. They supposedly compete with krakens for dominance of the deep oceans, with battles between these titans causing whirlpools and the waves that can sink entire fleets. The legends become more confusing when we consider ice dragons, creatures supposedly dwelling in the frozen waters of the shivering sea and the white waste beyond. Ice dragons are described as larger than their Valyrian cousins, made not of flesh, but of living ice. They breathe not fire, but cold, a blast of frozen air so intense it can freeze a man solid instantly. Their wings are supposedly translucent, like sheets of ice, and they glow with pale blue light. Ice dragons feature in children's stories and old songs, but no credible sighting has been recorded in living memory. Sailors claim to see them in the far north, flying above the glaciers, but these sightings always happen at distance, in poor visibility, leaving room for doubt. Are ice dragons real creatures, perhaps surviving relatives of fire-breathing dragons that adapted to Arctic environments? Are they magical constructs, similar to White Walkers? Or are they purely mythological, invented by imaginative singers to explain strange lights and sounds in the frozen north? Then we have unicorns, and here the legends become almost playful. Unicorns in the world of Game of Thrones are not the elegant horned horses of European mythology. They are shaggy, aggressive creatures native to the island of Skagos off the east coast of the north. Scarsea unicorns are described as goat-like, with dark fur and spiral horns, more like Markhor goats or prehistoric rhinoceros than fairy tale steeds. These unicorns are said to be rare but real, and the Scagosi people supposedly ride them into battle. Whether this is true or elaborate folklore designed to make Skagos seem even more frightening to outsiders remains unclear. Skagos has a reputation as a wild, dangerous place inhabited by cannibals and giants, so adding unicorns to the list of threats barely registers. Meisters in the Citadel keep a stuffed specimen of a little Valyrian, a small primate with silver-white fur and violet eyes. They pat it for good luck before examinations. Daenerys hoped to see these creatures during her travels with the Dothraki, suggesting they are real but rare. But what about the other creatures mentioned in passing? The spotted thing with a neck like stilts that Syrio Forel saw, clearly a giraffe, or the hairy mouse pigs as big as cows, possibly capybaras. The world beyond Westeros clearly contains wonders upon wonders. Perhaps most fascinating are the fireworms, creatures that bridge the gap between legend and documented history. Fireworms are described as massive serpentine creatures, similar to dragons but lacking wings and legs, that burrow through rock and stone using their immense heat. They are native to the volcanic 14 flames of Valyria, dwelling in the magma chambers and lava tubes deep beneath the earth. Fireworms breathe fire like dragons, perhaps even hotter and more intense. They can tunnel through solid rock by melting it, leaving behind tubes of hardened glass in their wake. Ancient Valyrian slaves mining in the 14 flames would frequently encounter fireworms, with disastrous results. The creatures would burst through tunnel walls, incinerating entire work crews. After the doom of Valyria, fireworms have not been seen, but many believe they still exist in the ruins of Old Valyria, dwelling in the volcanic catacombs beneath the shattered peninsula. There is even a theory that Balerion the Black Dread, when he flew to Valyria with Princess Arya on his back, encountered a fireworm. Something wounded Balerion there, something powerful enough to injure the largest dragon in the world. What else but another dragon-like creature could have achieved such a feat? The existence of fireworms raises interesting questions about the relationship between different dragon-like creatures. Are fireworms an evolutionary ancestor to true dragons? Are they a separate species that evolved independently in volcanic environments? Or are they magical constructs created by the ancient Valyrians through their blood magic and fire sorcery? Then there are the merlings, half-human and half-fish creatures that supposedly dwell in the oceans. Merlings are discussed in the same skeptical tones as White Walkers once were, as fairy tales told to amuse children. Tyrion dismisses them as myths when he hears reports of them. But in a world where dragons and White Walkers both proved real, can we be certain merlings are fictional? Some scholars theorize that merlings might be connected to the Deep Ones, legendary creatures from the Dawn Age that were supposedly a mix of human and fish, dwelling in the ocean depths and occasionally coming ashore to interact with or attack coastal settlements. The Deep Ones are particularly associated with the Iron Islands and their religion, the Drowned God. Could the Ironborn's affinity for the sea and their practices of drowning and resurrection have origins in contact with Deep Ones in ancient times? These questions lead us to perhaps the strangest category of legendary creatures, those that might not be creatures at all, but rather manifestations of magical forces. Shadows, for instance, the creatures summoned by Melisandre through her dark magic. Are these beings in any meaningful sense, or are they simply shaped darkness, given temporary coherence through blood magic? They appear, they act, they kill, then they dissipate. What are they in the moments between their summoning and their dissolution? The legends pile upon each other, each more fantastic than the last. Griffins are shown in carvings on dragonstone, suggesting the Valyrians knew of them or believed in them. Basilisks infest the jungles of Sotorios, six-legged lizards with venomous bites and blood that can drive animals mad. Wyverns, smaller than dragons but fiercer and unable to breathe fire, make the continent of Sotorios nearly uninhabitable through their aggression. The world of Game of Thrones is far larger than Westeros, and the further we travel from the familiar Seven Kingdoms, the stranger the creatures become. In Korth, they speak of striped horses, clearly zebras. In Yeti, there are basilisks and vampires. In the Shadowlands beyond Ashai, creatures of pure shadow are said to dwell. The possibilities seem endless, limited only by imagination and the fact that much of the world remains unexplored even in the narrative. What makes these legendary creatures so important is not whether they are objectively real, it's that people believe in them, fear them, shape their cultures around them. The Greyjoys draw strength from their Kraken sigil, whether Krakens exist or not. The Night's Watch prepared for White Walkers for thousands of years, long after most people dismissed them as myths. Belief in these creatures shapes behavior, influences decisions, becomes a kind of truth whether the creatures themselves exist. And in a world where magic demonstrably exists, where dragons fly and dead men walk, dismissing any legend becomes foolish. The masters of the Citadel pride themselves on reason and skepticism, but even they must acknowledge that their skepticism about dragons proved wrong. What else might they be wrong about? What other creatures might exist in the uncharted corners of the world, waiting to be discovered or rediscovered? The legendary creatures represent the unknown, the mysterious, the edges of the map where ancient cartographers wrote, "Here be dragons." They are reminders that for all humanity thinks it knows, the world remains full of wonders and terrors beyond our understanding. And perhaps that's their greatest value, not as real creatures to be categorized and studied, but as symbols of possibility, of magic, of the infinite strangeness that exists just beyond the edge of certainty. Not all dangerous creatures rely on size or strength. Some of the most deadly beings in the Bestiary are small, almost delicate, their danger coming not from raw power, but from toxic venom that can kill in moments. These creatures inspire a different kind of fear than dragons or dire wolves. Not the awe of overwhelming force, but the paranoia of knowing that death might come from something you never saw. A creature tiny enough to hide in your belongings or climb your bedpost while you sleep. The manticore stands paramount among these venomous terrors, though the creature bears little resemblance to the classical manticore of mythology with its human face and lion's body. In the world of Game of Thrones, manticores are scorpion-like creatures, small enough to fit in the palm of your hand, but equipped with the most lethal venom known to maesters and poison masters. A manticore's body is segmented chitin, usually deep red or black, with a long curved tail that ends in a barbed stinger. They have 6 legs rather than 8, distinguishing them from true scorpions or spiders, and their faces, if you look closely enough, have an unsettling human-like quality that gives them their name. Small black eyes glitter with malevolent intelligence. When threatened, a manticore can fold itself into a convex shape resembling a scarab beetle, making it easy to hide or transport. The venom is what makes manticores so deadly. When a manticore stings, it injects a toxin so potent that even a small amount causes almost immediate death. The venom attacks the heart, causing cardiac arrest within minutes. The only way to slow the poison is to use a clotting agent to thicken the blood, forcing the venom to spread more slowly through the body. But even this only buys time. Without proper antidotes, which are expensive and rare, a manticore sting is a death sentence. Manticores are native to the Jade Sea region, particularly the Manticore Isles, which take their name from the creatures. They can be found in markets throughout Essos, sold to assassins and poison masters willing to pay premium prices. The wealthy Sea Lord of Braavos keeps manticores in his menagerie as symbols of exotic danger. Daenerys Targaryen narrowly survives an assassination attempt involving a manticore, saved only by Ser Barristan Selmy's quick reflexes and quicker blade. The manticore's behavior is peculiar for a venomous creature. Most scorpions and spiders are defensive, stinging only when threatened. Manticores, by contrast, are aggressively territorial and will attack with minimal provocation. Some natural philosophers theorize this aggression is magically enhanced, that the Valyrians, or perhaps earlier sorcerers from the east, altered the creatures to make them more effective as weapons and tools of assassination. Using manticore venom as a poison requires careful preparation. The venom must be harvested from live specimens, a dangerous task that requires thick gloves and steady nerves. The venom can be mixed with other substances to deliver it via dart, blade, or food. Oberyn Martell famously coated his spear with manticore venom before his duel with Sir Gregor Clegane. Though Oberyn lost the duel and died horribly, the venom ensured that the mountain died as well, eventually, after days of agonizing suffering. Basilisks represent another class of venomous horror, though these are far larger and more overtly monstrous than manticores. The basilisks of this world are not the giant serpents of Harry Potter fame, but rather six-legged lizards covered in rough scales, with flat heads and malevolent eyes. They can grow as large as bulls, making them among the largest venomous creatures in the known world. These basilisks are native to the tropical regions of Essos, particularly the jungle-covered Basilisk Isles, north of Sothorios. They are ambush predators, lying in wait near water sources or game trails, relying on their rough camouflage to blend with vegetation and rocks. When prey approaches, the basilisk lunges with surprising speed for its bulk, biting with jaws that deliver a potent hemotoxin. The venom of a basilisk attacks blood cells, causing massive internal hemorrhaging. Victims bleed from their eyes, nose, and mouth. The toxin also induces violent madness in warm-blooded creatures, making victims attack anything nearby in a frenzy before succumbing to the bleeding. This makes basilisk venom valuable to certain unsavory individuals, for it can be mixed with food to turn loyal guards into berserkers who will attack their own masters before dying. But basilisk blood is even more sought after than the venom. When properly prepared, basilisk blood can be used to coat meat, giving it a savory scent that attracts predators while inducing that same violent madness in anything that eats it. This has led to basilisk blood being used in blood sports across Yi, where captured basilisks are set against other animals, particularly dogs, with wagers placed on the outcomes. Moving from the tropics to the forsaken continent of Sothorios, we encounter wyverns, creatures often confused with dragons, but decidedly different. Wyverns possess 2 legs rather than 4, smaller bodies, and lack the ability to breathe fire. What they lack in fire-breathing capability, they make up for in sheer ferocity and venom delivered through their bite. A wyvern's appearance is unsettling, reptilian, like a dragon, but with proportions that seem wrong. Their wings are larger relative to their body, allowing for incredible aerial agility. Their heads are more serpentine, lacking the massive jaws of true dragons. Their scales are often darker, greys and browns and deep greens that help them blend into the jungles of Sothorios. Wyverns are territorial and aggressive, attacking anything that enters their hunting range. They hunt in packs, unlike solitary dragons, coordinating their assaults with disturbing intelligence. A wyvern pack can bring down prey much larger than themselves through cooperation, with some wyverns distracting while others attack from different angles. The bite of a wyvern delivers a necrotizing venom that causes flesh to rot and die. Wounds fester and spread, blackening the skin around them, refusing to heal. Victims of wyvern attacks often die not from the initial wounds, but from infection and tissue death, spreading through their bodies. The only treatment is amputation, cutting away infected flesh before the rot can spread. Wyverns are one of the primary reasons Sothorios remains largely unexplored and unsettled. Expeditions to the continent report constant attacks from packs of wyverns. They nest in the canopy of the jungle, dropping down on unsuspecting travelers. They hunt at night and during the day, giving no respite. Entire colonies have been wiped out by sustained wyvern attacks. There are other venomous creatures worth noting. The spotted spiders of the Shadowlands, whose bites cause hallucinations and paralysis. The serpents of a dozen varieties throughout the known world, from tiny vipers that hide in boots to massive pythons capable of swallowing a goat whole. Certain toads and frogs secrete toxins through their skin, potent enough to kill a man who simply handles them. But perhaps the most insidious venomous threat comes not from exotic creatures, but from prepared poisons derived from them. The poison masters of Essos, particularly those in cities like Korth and Meereen, have developed countless poisons using animal venoms as their base. They create poisons that mimic natural death, that cause specific symptoms, that act immediately or are delayed for days. The Strangler, one of the most infamous poisons in Westeros, is derived from plants but prepared using compounds found in certain sea creatures. It causes the victim's throat to constrict and seal shut, leading to death by suffocation that looks like a natural seizure. Joffrey Baratheon dies from the Strangler at his own wedding, his face turning purple as he claws at his throat, unable to draw breath. Tears of Lies is another famous poison, tasteless and odorless, that causes symptoms resembling a flux of the bowels. The victim appears to die from natural illness, making it ideal for subtle assassinations where direct evidence of murder would be problematic. It's said to be derived from rare mushrooms found only in certain caves near Lees, but some versions use venom from sea creatures to enhance its effectiveness. The existence of these venomous creatures and the poisons derived from them adds a layer of paranoia to the world. A king on his throne must fear not just the sword, but the cup of wine that might be poisoned. A noble plotting against rivals must consider whether that letter was coated in contact poison. Children are taught from young ages not to handle strange creatures they find, not to eat unknown foods, to be constantly vigilant. This paranoia shapes society in interesting ways. Food tasters become essential positions in noble households. Meisters study toxicology as extensively as they study medicine, for one cannot cure poisons without understanding them. The faceless men of Braavos, those mysterious assassins, are said to know poisons so obscure that Meisters cannot even identify them, let alone treat their effects. The venomous creatures represent a different type of power than the magical or mighty beasts. They are the power of the small and overlooked, the dangerous beauty of something tiny enough to hide in your pocket. They remind us that in a world of dragons and white walkers, death can still come from something no larger than your thumb, delivered so quickly and quietly that you never know what killed you until it's far too late. We have discussed creatures of flesh and blood, of fang and claw and venom, but now we must turn our attention to beings that exist in that liminal space between the physical and the supernatural. These are the creatures that challenge our understanding of what is possible. Beings who wield magic, who predate humanity, who exist outside the normal laws of nature. The children of the forest stand first among these mystical beings, for they are the original inhabitants of Westeros, present on the continent for millennia before the first men crossed the arm of dawn from Essos. But to call the children merely inhabitants does not capture their significance. They were stewards of the land, mystical beings so intertwined with nature itself that the boundary between them and the forest became blurred. The children are small, barely taller than human children even when fully grown, which is how they earned their name from the first men. But their appearance is distinctly non-human. Their skin is nut brown and dappled with lighter spots, like the hide of a fawn. Their eyes are large and slitted like a cat's, usually gold or green, giving them excellent vision even in the darkness of the deep forest. Most distinctively, their hands have only 4 digits, 3 fingers and a thumb, each tipped with sharp black claws rather than fingernails. The children adorn themselves not in woven cloth, but in organic materials, leaves and vines, bark stripped from trees and shaped mushrooms and moss. They were extensions of the forest itself, and the forest was an extension of them. Their ears were large and pointed, capable of hearing sounds that humans could never detect. They moved through the woods without sound, leaving no tracks, appearing and disappearing like shadows under trees. But the children's true significance lies in their magical abilities. Some children were born with gifts far beyond their kin, individuals called greenseers. A greenseer possessed the ability to perceive past, present, and future through dreams and visions. They could communicate with animals, slip into their minds, and see through their eyes. More incredibly, greenseers could connect with the weirwood trees, the sacred white-bark trees with faces carved into them. Through the weirwood network, greenseers could see anything that had ever happened before any weirwood tree, anywhere in the world. Time became fluid and malleable. A greenseer could watch events from thousands of years ago as if they were happening in the present moment. The most powerful greenseers could even send whispers through time, appearing in visions, guiding events from centuries in the past. The weirwood trees themselves are crucial to understanding the children. These trees, with their bone-white bark and blood-red leaves, were sacred to the children. They carved faces into the trunks, faces that weep red sap like tears of blood. Through these faces, the old gods watched. Whether the old gods were the children themselves, spirits of the forest, or something else entirely remains unclear, but the connection between children, weirwoods, and divine power is undeniable. When a child of the forest died, they believed their spirit joined with the weirwood trees, becoming part of that vast network of consciousness that spans the continent. The trees remembered everything, witnessed everything, and through them, the children achieved a kind of immortality. Even centuries after their physical death, their consciousness could persist in the wood, their memories accessible to future greenseers. The children were not merely passive observers of nature. They were wood dancers, warriors who defended their forests with bows made from weirwood and arrows tipped with dragonglass. They used magic to fight, calling down roots from trees to entangle enemies, causing earth to rise up and swallow invaders, communicating with animals to attack in coordinated assaults. When the first men arrived in Westeros 12,000 years ago, the children met them with fierce resistance. The first men cut down forests to create farmland, felling weirwoods with abandon, which to the children was not just destruction of trees, but murder of their gods and ancestors. The war that followed lasted 2,000 years, with neither side able to gain permanent advantage. In desperation, the children used their most powerful magic to try to stop the first men's advance. They shattered the Arm of Dawn, the land bridge connecting Essos to Westeros, breaking it into the chain of islands now called the Stepstones. This cataclysmic act of magic drowned thousands, but only slowed the first men temporarily. The children also flooded the neck, creating the swamps and bogs that divide the north from the southern kingdoms. Eventually, a pact was reached on the Isle of Faces in the midst of the God's Eye Lake. The first men would take the open lands for their farms and castles, while the children would keep the forests. For 4,000 years, this peace held. The first men even adopted the children's religion, worshipping the old gods and the weirwoods, learning from the children about the magic that still flowed through the world. But then came the White Walkers, and here the history becomes dark and controversial. According to revelations in the show, the children created the White Walkers as a weapon against the first men. They took a captive man, bound him to a weirwood tree, and drove a shard of dragon glass into his heart, transforming him into the Night King. But the weapon they created turned against them, breaking free of their control and threatening to destroy all life. The children fought alongside the first men and the giants during the long night, using their magic to help drive back the others. They aided Bran the Builder in constructing the wall, weaving their magic into the ice to create wards that White Walkers could not pass. For 8,000 years, those wards held. But the creation of the White Walkers was not the children's only miscalculation. When the Andals invaded Westeros 6,000 years ago, bringing the faith of the Seven and viewing the old gods as demon worship, they hunted the children mercilessly. The Andals cut down weirwoods wherever they found them, hacking down the heart trees and burning them. The children, already diminished from their wars and magical expenditures, could not withstand this onslaught. They fled north, beyond the wall, hiding in vast cave systems and the deepest forests where even wildlings dared not go. Over millennia, their numbers dwindled to a handful. By the time Bran Stark encounters them in the cave of the Three-Eyed Raven, they are a dying race, perhaps the last of their kind. The children speak of themselves sadly, knowing they are disappearing. Leaf, one of the few children who appears in the story, tells Bran, "That was in the dawn of days, when our sun was rising. Now it sinks, and this is our long dwindling." They accept their fate with a melancholy dignity, these ancient beings who have seen the rise and fall of civilizations, who remember when the world was young. Giants are another race that predates humanity in Westeros, though they are less magical than the children. Giants are exactly what their name suggests. Massive humanoids standing between 12 and 14 feet tall, covered in shaggy hair, immensely strong, and possessing a primitive but genuine intelligence and culture. A giant's appearance is simultaneously human and not. They have the basic structure of humans, with 2 arms, 2 legs, a head with a face, but their proportions are different. Their limbs are thick as tree trunks, corded with muscle. Their hands are massive, each finger as thick as a man's wrist. Their faces are brutish, with heavy brows, broad noses, and wide mouths filled with square teeth. Giants speak their own language, a rumbling tongue of simple words and grunts that nonetheless conveys complex ideas. Some giants can speak the common tongue of Westeros, though with heavy accents and simple vocabulary. They live in small family groups, dwelling in caves or crude structures made from mammoth bones and hides. Despite their fearsome appearance, giants are not inherently violent. They are generally peaceful, living simple lives hunting and gathering beyond the wall. They will defend themselves when threatened, and a giant in combat is terrifying, wielding crude clubs the size of logs or simply grabbing enemies and crushing them. But they prefer to avoid conflict when possible. The wildlings beyond the wall have learned to coexist with giants, and some giants even join wildling bands. Woon Woon, the giant who fights at the Battle of Hardhome and later at Winterfell, demonstrates both the power and the gentle nature of giants. He fights ferociously when needed, ripping apart whites and white walkers with his bare hands. But he also shows kindness to humans he considers friends, protecting them at cost to himself. Like the children, giants are dying out. Leaf mentions that the giants are almost gone, their numbers reduced to perhaps a few dozen at most. They cannot compete with humans, cannot adapt to the changing world. Each generation sees fewer births, more deaths, until soon there may be none left at all. The relationship between children and giants was complex. They called the children Wo Dak Na Gran in their language, meaning squirrel people, both because the children were small and quick, and because they loved trees. There were conflicts between the two races in ancient times, but also periods of cooperation. Both recognized each other as remnants of a world that was passing away. Moving beyond Westeros to the waters surrounding the continents, we encounter the Deep Ones, creatures so shrouded in mystery and legend that their very existence remains debatable. The Deep Ones are said to be a mix of human and fish, amphibious beings that lived in the ocean depths during the Dawn Age. They would occasionally emerge from the sea to interact with coastal settlements, though whether these interactions were peaceful or hostile depends on which legends you believe. The Deep Ones are most closely associated with the Iron Islands and their religion of the drowned god. Some scholars theorize that the Ironborn's traditions, their practice of drowning and resurrecting their priests, their affinity for the sea, all originate from ancient contact with Deep Ones. The sea stone chair on which the Lord of the Iron Islands sits is made of black, oily stone of unknown origin, possibly crafted by Deep Ones in ages past. Across the known world, structures of this same greasy black stone can be found. The toadstone on the Basilisk Isles, buildings in the ruins of Yin in Sothorios, the entire city of Ashai in the Shadowlands. All are made of this same material that seems to predate human civilization. Who built these structures? Were they all the work of Deep Ones, or were there other ancient races we know nothing about? The existence of multiple ancient races raises profound questions about the history of the world. Before humans, before even the children and giants, were there others? The Deep Ones, if they existed, would be just one example. What other creatures walked these lands, built these cities, worked these magics before humanity even existed? Finally, we must address the shadow creatures, the beings summoned by Melisandre through her dark blood magic. These are not creatures in the traditional sense, but rather manifestations of magical power given temporary physical form. Melisandre uses the life force and potency of Stannis Baratheon to create shadow assassins that can pass through walls, cannot be harmed by physical weapons, and can kill with a touch. The shadows appear as dark silhouettes, vaguely humanoid in shape, but they are not solid. They can slip through cracks under doors, phase through walls, become incorporeal when attacked. When they manifest to kill their target, they solidify just long enough to strike, delivering a killing blow that leaves no physical wound, but stops the heart. Creating a shadow requires tremendous power and takes a toll on both the sorcerer and the person whose life force is being used. Melisandre grows weaker each time she births a shadow. Stannis becomes more haggard, as if something vital has been drained from him. This is magic at its most costly, requiring literal life force to fuel it. The shadows serve their purpose and then dissipate, returning to whatever dark realm spawned them. They cannot exist indefinitely in the physical world. They are tools, weapons, not living beings with will or consciousness of their own. When their task is complete, they simply cease to exist. These magical and mystical beings represent the oldest layers of the world, the foundations upon which the history of humans is built. They remind us that Westeros and the lands beyond were not always the domain of humanity, that there were others here first, beings with their own histories and cultures and magics. As these beings disappear, something irreplaceable is lost. The world becomes more mundane, less mysterious, diminished by their absence. While Westeros dominates the narrative of Game of Thrones, the eastern continent of Essos is far larger, far more diverse, and home to creatures both wonderful and terrible that never appear in the Seven Kingdoms. These are beasts adapted to tropical jungles, endless steppes, burning deserts, and frozen tundras. They represent the incredible biodiversity of a world that extends far beyond what most Westerosi ever see. We begin with perhaps the most mundane yet symbolically important creatures of Essos: horses. The Dothraki Sea, that vast grassland in the heart of Essos, is named for the grass that covers it and for the Dothraki people who roam it, but horses are what make that lifestyle possible. The Dothraki are perhaps the finest horsemen in the known world, and their horses are legendary for their speed, endurance, and temperament. A Dothraki horse is smaller than the war horses bred in Westeros, but faster and more agile. They can gallop for hours without tiring, surviving on the tough grass of the steppes. A Dothraki warrior is rarely separated from his horse. They eat in the saddle, sleep beside their mounts, even mate on horseback, according to their traditions. The Dothraki revere horses to an extent that seems excessive to outsiders. Their only god is the great stallion, and they believe the first man emerged from the womb of the earth 1,000 years ago, riding a horse. When a Khal dies, his horse is sacrificed to carry him to the Nightlands. Horse meat is a staple of their diet, particularly when they can obtain nothing else. But there are other horses in Essos worth noting. The shadow horses of the Shadowlands beyond Ashai are said to be beautiful beyond measure, with coats that shimmer like silk and intelligence that borders on human. These horses are never sold, only given as gifts to those deemed worthy. Daenerys receives gifts from the Ashai, but never a shadow horse, suggesting she was not considered worthy, or perhaps that the horses chose not to go with her. Then there are Zorcies, hybrids bred by the Jogos Nhai people who live in the northeastern steppes. Zorcies are crossbreeds between horses and some striped equine creature, probably zebras, though that name is not used. They have the endurance of horses but the striped camouflage that helps them blend into grasslands. The Jogos Nhai breed Zorces as if they were a distinct species, suggesting centuries of selective breeding. Moving beyond equines, we encounter the massive herd animals of the Dothraki Sea and other grasslands. The Dothraki do not herd cattle as Westerosi do, but they hunt the wild aurochs that roam in great herds across the plains. These aurochs, the same species found in Westeros, but in far greater numbers, provide meat, hides, and bones that the Dothraki use for tools and weapons. In the jungles of Sartorios and the Yiti regions, we find creatures that seem almost prehistoric. Massive lizards called lizard lions, essentially large crocodiles or alligators, lurk in rivers and swamps. They can grow to 20 feet in length, with jaws powerful enough to snap a man in half. They are ambush predators, lying motionless in murky water until prey comes close, then exploding into motion with terrifying speed. The lizard lions are particularly dangerous because they look like logs or rocks when motionless. Travelers unfamiliar with them will walk right past, not realizing the danger until jaws snap shut on their leg. The creatures are essentially dinosaurs in all but name, holdovers from earlier epochs that have survived in the remote jungles where humans rarely venture. Sothorios is also home to great apes, massive primates that inhabit the jungle canopy. These apes are intelligent and aggressive, territorial about their treetop domains. They throw branches and feces at intruders, scream warnings to their troops, and will attack in coordinated groups if sufficiently provoked. Some grow large enough to overpower a human through strength alone. The Summer Isles, far to the south of Westeros across the Summer Sea, are inhabited by creatures adapted to tropical paradise conditions. Parrots and monkeys, mentioned by Syrio as pets kept by dragon lords, originate from the Summer Isles. The actual native islanders are human, of course, but the wildlife of the islands includes numerous colourful birds, tree-dwelling mammals, and coastal creatures found nowhere else. But perhaps the strangest creature mentioned from Essos is the little Valyrian, a small primate with silver-white fur and large violet eyes. These creatures are named for their resemblance to Valyrians with their distinctive colouring. The Citadel in Westeros keeps a stuffed specimen that Meisters pat for luck before examinations. Daenerys hoped to see living little Valyrians during her travels with Drogo's Khalasar, but never did. The existence of little Valyrians raises interesting questions. Are they natural creatures that happen to have colouring similar to Valyrians? Or is there some magical connection? Did the Valyrians breed them, perhaps from monkeys, using their blood magic to create creatures in their own image? Or is the resemblance pure coincidence, simply a quirk of evolution that produced silver fur and violet eyes? In the markets of Court and other eastern cities, travellers report seeing creatures from the furthest reaches of the known world. Syrio describes striped horses, clearly zebras, great spotted things with necks as long as stilts, obviously giraffes, and hairy mouse pigs as big as cows, which might be capybaras or some other large rodent. He mentions stinging manticores, tigers that carry their young in pouches, which must be thylacines or similar marsupials, and terrible walking lizards with size for claws, perhaps some type of predatory dinosaur-like creature. The fact that such creatures exist and are brought to Braavos and other cities for display tells us something important about the world. It is vast, still largely unexplored, full of wonders that most people never see. For every creature we know about, how many exist that we don't know about? In the jungles of Sothorios, in the frozen wastes east of the Shivering Sea, in the mysterious lands of Ultos, and even further east, what creatures live that no human has ever recorded? The eastern continent is also home to dangerous creatures that, while natural, pose significant threats. Spotted tigers, massive felines from the jungles near Korth, hunt humans as readily as deer. Sand snakes, venomous serpents that burrow through desert sand in the red wastes, strike from below without warning. Cave-dwelling bats in certain regions carry diseases that can wipe out entire populations. There are elephants in Essos, used as war beasts by the Golden Company and other mercenary groups. These are not the placid animals of our world, but trained killing machines, wearing armor and carrying towers on their backs filled with archers. An elephant in battle is worth dozens of knights, for horses will not charge an elephant, and infantry cannot stand against their trampling advance. The oceans surrounding Essos contain their own menagerie. Whales are hunted by the Ibbenese whalers, massive creatures that can feed a town for a month. Seals and walruses inhabit the northern shores. Sharks patrol the warm waters of the summer sea. Dolphins, considered good luck by sailors, swim alongside ships. But there are stranger things in the deep waters. Some sailors report seeing massive jellyfish with bodies 20 feet across, trailing tentacles 100 feet long, drifting with the currents and stinging anything that touches them. Others speak of schools of fish that work together to bring down prey, coordinating their attacks like wolves of the sea. The biodiversity of Essos and the lands beyond is a reminder that the world of Game of Thrones is not just about Westeros, not just about the Game of Thrones itself. There is a whole planet of creatures living their lives, unaware and uncaring about human politics. A shadow cat hunting in the mountains of Dawn doesn't know or care who sits the Iron Throne. An auroch grazing the Dothraki Sea is not concerned with whether the Targaryen dynasty continues or falls. These creatures are part of the living world, and they will continue to exist long after the current conflicts are resolved. They were here before humans, at least some of them, and they will be here after. They are the constant backdrop against which human drama plays out, the proof that life is bigger than any one species' ambitions. Throughout this bestiary, we have encountered creatures of all types, magical and mundane, dangerous and docile, massive and minuscule. But one thread runs through many of these encounters: the bond that forms between humans and beasts, connections that transcend simple training or taming, relationships that become something more than the sum of their parts. The most profound of these bonds is warging, the ability possessed by certain individuals to slip into the mind of an animal and control it. This is not merely telepathic communication or empathic bonding. It is a complete merger, the human consciousness inhabiting the animal's body, seeing through its eyes, feeling through its senses, controlling its movements. Warging is an ancient ability passed down through bloodlines that trace back to the first men. The Stark children all possess this gift to varying degrees, inherited from their father's ancient lineage. Bran discovers it first, initially through dreams, where he runs through the forest as Summer, his direwolf. Gradually, he learns to warg while awake, consciously entering Summer's mind, experiencing the world as a wolf experiences it. The sensation of warging is described as initially disorienting. The human mind must adjust to processing information from different senses, seeing with sharper eyes that perceive motion better but color less clearly, smelling scents with a richness beyond human comprehension, hearing frequencies that human ears cannot detect. The instincts of the animal also bleed through, urges to hunt, to mark territory, to submit to or dominate other pack members. But with practice, a warg learns to control these impulses, to maintain their human intelligence while using the animal's abilities. Bran becomes proficient at warging into Summer, using the direwolf to scout, to hunt, to fight, while his own human body remains safely hidden. The bond between them deepens to the point where Bran and Summer are almost one being, sharing thoughts and feelings even when not actively warging. Other Stark children display warging abilities, though less developed. Arya dreams of Nymeria across the sea, her wolf having adventures that Arya experiences in sleep. Robb clearly had some connection with Grey Wind, using the direwolf as a scout during his campaign. Jon wargs into Ghost after his death, his consciousness taking refuge in the wolf while his body lies dead, an anchor that allows him to be resurrected without losing his mind. The wildlings beyond the wall have known about warging for generations. They call those with the ability skin changers and treat them with a mixture of respect and fear. A powerful skin changer can control multiple animals simultaneously, switching between them at will. Varamir Sixskins, whose very name indicates his power, controls a shadow cat, a snow bear, 3 wolves, and an eagle, seeing through their eyes, hunting through their bodies, living multiple lives at once. But warging has its dangers. When an animal dies while a warg is inside it, the warg experiences the death viscerally, the trauma potentially causing madness or death. When a warg dies while inside an animal, their consciousness can become trapped there, living out the rest of the animal's life unable to return to human form. Varamir tries to warg into a woman as he dies, attempting to steal her body, but her consciousness fights back and he ends up trapped in his wolf instead. There are also ethical questions around warging. Is it right to violate an animal's autonomy, to override its will and control its body? Bran wrestles with this question when he learns he can warg into Hodor, the simple-minded stable boy. Hodor's mind is present, but can be pushed aside, allowing Bran to control Hodor's body. This proves useful, even necessary for Bran's survival, but it is clearly a form of violation, one that Hodor cannot consent to or resist. The bond between dragon riders and their dragons operates on different principles, but shares some similarities with warging. A dragon will accept only one rider at a time, forming a connection that seems to go beyond training. The dragon can sense its rider's emotions and intentions. Rider and dragon move as one in battle, anticipating each other's actions. The Targaryens believed this bond was magical in nature, something encoded in their Valyrian blood through centuries of interbreeding between dragon lord families. Only those with the proper bloodline could ride dragons, and even then, the dragon had to choose to accept them. Many Targaryens tried to claim dragons and were rejected, sometimes fatally. Daenerys' bond with her 3 dragons, particularly Drogon, seems deeper than simple rider and mount. She hatched them from eggs by walking into fire, emerging unburnt with the newborn dragons clinging to her. They imprinted on her as a mother figure, seeing her as one of their own. When she first rides Drogon, it is not through domination, but through connection, a joining of wills. But dragons are not slaves to their riders. They retain their own personalities and will. Drogon sometimes ignores Daenerys' commands, acting on his own instincts. During her time in Meereen, when she chains Rhaegal and Viserion in the catacombs to prevent them from killing more children, Drogon simply flies away, refusing to be imprisoned. He returns later on his own terms, when he chooses to. The relationship between humans and regular animals in this world also deserves examination. Horses are not just transportation, but companions to knights and cavalrymen. The bond between a knight and his warhorse can span decades, the horse becoming as much a part of the knight's identity as his sword or shield. When a destrier falls in battle, its rider grieves genuinely. Dogs serve as hunting companions, guards, and friends. The Clegane family's origin story involves dogs fighting lions to protect a Lannister lord. Dogs whose loyalty and ferocity were rewarded with knighthood for their master. Ramsay Bolton's hounds are twisted into weapons, trained to hunt and kill humans, but they still retain pack loyalty to their cruel master. Ravens serve as messengers, trained to fly between castles carrying news. Meisters breed and train these ravens over generations, creating birds that reliably fly to specific locations. But there are hints of something more. Some Meisters believe ravens are more intelligent than commonly thought, perhaps touched by the magic of the children of the forest, who used ravens as messengers long before humans adopted the practice. The faceless men of Braavos demonstrate another type of bond with animals. though this is more utilitarian than emotional. They use various creatures for their assassinations. Manticores delivered in packages, venomous snakes hidden in beds, trained cats to provide eyes and ears in places humans cannot access. These relationships are transactional, but they require understanding of animal behavior and needs. Throughout all these examples, we see a consistent theme. The line between human and animal is not as firm as we might think. Warging demonstrates this literally, human consciousness residing in animal bodies. But even without magic, the bonds formed between humans and beasts in this world have a depth and significance that goes beyond the practical. These bonds also serve as commentary on civilization and savagery, nature and culture. The Starks with their direwolves are connected to the wild, to the old ways, to a time when magic was common and the boundary between human and beast was more permeable. The Southerners who mock these bonds, who view animals as mere tools or property, are portrayed as having lost something essential, having become too civilized, too disconnected from the natural world. When Sansa's direwolf lady is killed, it is portrayed as a tragedy, not just for Sansa, but for the realm. Something innocent and good is destroyed by the cruelty and politics of kings, and that destruction marks the beginning of Sansa's long fall from innocence into the harsh realities of power. The death of Lady is the death of a piece of Sansa's soul, the severing of a bond that should have been sacred. The bonds between humans and beasts in this world are reminders that we are all part of the same natural order, that the divisions we draw between species are somewhat arbitrary, that intelligence and consciousness exist on spectrums rather than as binary conditions. A direwolf is not human, but it thinks, it feels, it mourns and loves and fights with purpose and intention. Is that not enough to deserve respect and consideration? These bonds are also sources of power in a world where magic is real. Bran becomes one of the most powerful individuals in Westeros, not through swordsmanship or dragons, but through his ability to warg, to see through the eyes of birds and wolves, to access the memories of weirwood trees. His power is fundamentally about connection, about erasing the boundaries between self and other. In the end, the bonds between man and beast in this world are microcosms of larger themes in the series. The importance of connection and loyalty, the danger of viewing others as mere tools, the power that comes from understanding rather than domination. Those who understand and respect these bonds, like the Starks with their wolves, are stronger for it. Those who reject or abuse these bonds, like those who kill direwolves or mistreat their horses, are shown to be lesser for it, more vulnerable, more isolated, more likely to fall. We have journeyed together through a comprehensive bestiary, cataloguing the creatures that inhabit the world of Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire. From the legendary dragons whose fire forged empires to the tiny manticores whose venom can fell kings, from the ancient children of the forest to the extinct lions of the western hills, we have explored a menagerie of life as diverse and complex as any that exists in literature or legend. But in doing so, we have discovered something more important than a simple list of creatures. We have uncovered layers of meaning, themes that resonate through the world George R.R. Martin has created. We have seen how these creatures reflect the history and culture of the civilizations around them, how they shape and are shaped by human actions, how they serve as symbols and warnings and promises. The dragons represent power, yes, but also hubris and the double-edged nature of ambition. The Targaryens rose to dominance on Dragonback, but they also nearly destroyed themselves through the dance of the dragons, their most powerful weapons turning against each other in civil war. Daenerys's dragons make her a queen, but also isolate her, marking her as something other than human, something to be feared as much as followed. The White Walkers and their army of the dead symbolize the ultimate enemy, the existential threat that makes all human conflicts seem petty and meaningless in comparison. They are death itself, inevitable and implacable, requiring all the living to stand together or perish. The tragedy is that humanity cannot overcome its divisions even in the face of extinction, that kings and lords still play their games even as winter comes. The direwolves embody loyalty and identity, the connection between the Stark children and their heritage. Each wolf's fate mirrors their owner's journey. When the wolves die, part of their humans dies with them. When the wolves survive and thrive, their humans find strength they did not know they possessed. The legendary creatures, the krakens and ice dragons and fire worms, represent the unknown, the mysterious, the magic that still exists in the corners of the world, despite humanity's best efforts to categorize and control everything. They remind us that the world is larger and stranger than we can comprehend, that there are still wonders and terrors waiting to be discovered. The venomous creatures, small and easily overlooked, demonstrate that power comes in many forms, that a king on a throne is as vulnerable as a peasant in a field, that death does not always announce itself with roars and flames, but sometimes arrives silently in the night, delivered by something no larger than your thumb. The children of the forest and the giants represent what is lost when civilization advances, when the old ways are forgotten, when magic fades from the world. They are beautiful and tragic in their slow extinction. Noble races brought low not by conquest, but by simple irrelevance, by a world that no longer has room for them. And the bonds between humans and beasts, the warging and the dragon riding and the simple companionship between knight and horse, all demonstrate that connection and understanding are forms of power as valid as steel or sorcery, that the walls we build between self and other are sometimes prison walls that limit us. Looking at the bestiary as a whole, we see a living ecosystem, a world that functions and breathes and evolves. The dragons affect the mammoths, which affect the giants, which affect the wildlings, which affect the Night's Watch, which affects the Seven Kingdoms. Everything is connected in ways both obvious and subtle. The extinction of lions in the west changes the culture of House Lannister. The return of dragons to the east changes the balance of power across two continents. The emergence of White Walkers from the north threatens to change everything, forever. This interconnectedness is crucial to understanding the series. Game of Thrones is not just about people fighting over a chair made of swords, though that is certainly part of it. It is about a world, a complete functioning world, with its own history and ecology and magic, a world where actions have consequences that ripple outward, affecting not just humans, but every creature that shares the world with them. The tragedy that runs through the bestiary is extinction, the steady disappearance of the remarkable and the magical. Dragons died out once and may die out again. Direwolves are vanishing. Mammoths are nearly gone. Giants are dwindling. The children of the forest are almost extinct. What is being lost is irreplaceable, species and magic and wonder that can never be recreated once they are gone. This theme of loss mirrors our own world, where species go extinct every day, where indigenous cultures disappear, where ancient knowledge is forgotten. Martin is commenting on what civilization costs, what we lose in the name of progress, whether that trade is worth it. He does not provide easy answers, but he makes us feel the loss, makes us mourn the passing of these creatures, even as we acknowledge that their extinction is perhaps inevitable. Yet there is also hope in the Bestiary. Dragons returned from extinction through Daenerys' miracle. Direwolves came back south of the Wall. Magic is growing stronger again in the world. Perhaps the losses are not permanent. Perhaps the cycle can be reversed. Perhaps there is still time to preserve what remains and restore what was lost. The Bestiary ultimately asks us to consider our relationship with the natural world and with creatures different from ourselves. Do we view them as resources to be exploited, enemies to be destroyed, or fellow inhabitants of a shared world who deserve consideration and respect? The characters who treat creatures with respect, the Starks with their wolves, Daenerys learning to properly control rather than dominate her dragons, are portrayed more sympathetically than those who abuse and exploit. As we reach the end of our journey through this complete bestiary, we must acknowledge that our catalogue, comprehensive as it is, cannot be truly complete. The world of Game of Thrones extends beyond the books and shows, into lands unexplored, regions unmapped, depths unplumbed. What creatures exist in the farthest east, beyond even Ashai? What swims in the deepest trenches of the Sunset Sea? What flies above the mountains of the Bone Mountains? We can only wonder. That uncertainty, that knowledge that the world is larger than we can fully know, is part of what makes the series so compelling. The bestiary we have explored tonight is not a closed catalogue, but an invitation to imagine, to wonder, to speculate. Each creature we have discussed opens up new questions and possibilities. So as we conclude our journey, I invite you to carry these creatures with you. Remember the direwolf's loyalty when you consider what bonds are worth preserving. Think of the dragon's power when you contemplate ambition and its costs. Recall the White Walkers when you face threats that require unity to overcome. Hold the memory of the children when you consider what is lost in the name of progress. These creatures are more than words on a page or images on a screen. They are symbols and warnings, promises and prophecies, mirrors held up to our own world and our own choices. They are George R.R. Martin's gift to us, a menagerie of impossible beasts made real through the power of story. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the bestiary of Game of Thrones. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the creatures that populate this magnificent world, I would be grateful if you would take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are so many more stories to explore, so many more corners of this world to examine. Together, we will continue to uncover its secrets, one tale at a time. Until next time, my dear adventurers, may your paths be safe, may your curiosity never dim, and may you always remember that in the world of ice and fire, winter is always coming, but so too is the spring that follows. The creatures wait, the stories continue, and the journey is far from over. Good night.